All right, let's talk about the European IVDR. It can feel like you're facing a final exam, right? And the biggest question on that test? Your technical documentation file. If you nail it, you're golden. But if you mess it up, well, you're looking at some pretty serious delays. So today, we're going to crack the code and give you the blueprint for a submission that flies through the first time. Let's dive in.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote, it comes straight from the source, the notified bodies. You know, the very people who will be grading your submission. What they're telling us is crystal clear. The biggest roadblocks aren't some complex scientific breakthrough you missed. Nope, it's the simple stuff. It's incomplete files and just a messy structure. That's what gets you stuck in review purgatory.
So, to make sure that doesn't happen to you, here's our game plan. We'll start with your IVDR blueprint. Then we'll get into the evidence dossier. After that, we'll talk about why it's a living document, and we'll wrap up with some essential tips for navigating your submission.
Okay, Section 1, your IVDR blueprint. This is all about laying the foundation for your submission. Think of this as the master plan for your entire device. It has to be clear, perfectly organized, and tell a complete story, from the very first idea all the way to the finished product.
So what exactly is this technical documentation, or TD as you'll hear it called? Well, at its core, it's the big, organized binder of proof. It's all the evidence you've collected to show that your device meets every single one of the IVDR's General Safety and Performance Requirements, or GSPRs. The best way to think about it isn't just a pile of documents, but more like a really well-reasoned legal case for why your device is safe and effective.
Now, these details in your device description, they are the absolute bedrock of your submission. Your intended purpose? That sets the stage for everything else. Your basic UDID, that's your device's main identifier, has to be the exact same everywhere, no exceptions. And for your risk classification, you can't just say we're Class C because of Rule 3. You have to explain why Rule 3 applies and, just as importantly, why the other rules don't. The big takeaway here is consistency, consistency, consistency. Any little mismatch is going to be a huge red flag for your reviewer.
And if you're wondering where these best practices come from, well, they come from groups like Team NB, which is literally the association for the notified bodies themselves. So following their guidance isn't just some helpful tip. It's basically like being handed the answer key to the test. You'd be crazy not to use it.
All right, our foundation is set. Time to move on to Section 2, the evidence dossier. This is where we build the pillars of proof. If that device description was the blueprint, this section is all the engineering reports and material tests that prove the building is actually safe and won't fall down. It's the hard evidence that your device does what you say it does, safely.
At the absolute heart of your evidence is risk management, and you have to do it according to the EN ISO 1491 standard. Now, please hear me on this. This is not a checklist you do once and then file away. It's a living, breathing cycle. First, you plan your entire process. Then, you analyze every single hazard you can possibly think of, from a design flaw to a user error, all the way to disposal. Then you implement real controls to bring those risks down. And finally, you have to write a report that concludes that whatever risk is left is totally acceptable when weighed against the benefits. This whole process is a loop that never stops as long as your device is on the market.
So you've got this mountain of evidence. How on earth do you make it easy for someone to navigate? The answer is a GSPR checklist. Seriously, this is the gold standard. For every single requirement in Annex I, you create a line item. You say yes or no it applies, you describe your method for meeting it, and then, this is key, you provide the exact document name and page number where they can find the proof. You're basically creating a perfect, clickable roadmap for your reviewer. You make their job easy, and they'll thank you for it.
Okay, when it comes to performance evidence, it all comes down to 3 pillars. You have to prove all 3. First up, scientific validity. This is the so what question. Is there a real scientifically established link between the thing you're measuring, the analyte, and the actual clinical condition? Second, analytical performance. This is all about your device. Can it accurately and reliably find and measure that analyte every single time? And finally, clinical performance. This brings it all together. Do the results from your device actually help the patient in a real-world clinical setting? You can't have one without the others. You need a rock-solid case for all 3.
Let's zoom in on that analytical performance piece for a second. These are the absolute must-have studies. You need to show accuracy, that's both trueness and precision. You need to show specificity, which means proving that other similar substances won't accidentally trip up your test and cause a false positive.
You got to define your measuring range from the lowest amount it can detect to the highest. And stability, this is a big one. You need data proving it works for its entire shelf life, while it's in use, and after being shipped. And you need that for at least 3 different manufacturing lots. Oh, and if your label says it works on multiple specimen types, you need full validation data for every single one.
All right, you did it. You built the dossier, you survived the review, you got your CE mark. Time to pop the champagne. Job done, right? Not so fast. Welcome to Section 3, the living document. Because the second your device is out there on the market, your technical documentation starts a whole new chapter. It's not over. It's just beginning.
A huge part of this new chapter is post-market reporting. What you have to do depends on your device's risk class. For the lower risk devices, that's Class A and B, you'll be doing a post-market surveillance report, or a PMSR. You just update it whenever necessary. But for the higher risk Class C and D devices, the requirements are a lot stricter. You need a periodic safety update report, a PSUR, and it's got to be a much more detailed analysis, updated at least every single year. It all comes down to risk.
And all of this data you're collecting feeds into something called your Post-Market Performance Follow-Up Plan, your PMPF. Let's be really clear here. This is not just about sitting back and waiting for complaint calls to come in. No way. This is about proactively going out and collecting real-world data to confirm that your device is still safe and performing exactly the way you said it would. So you have to ask yourself, is your PMPF plan an active, living process, or is it just another document collecting dust on a shelf?
Okay, let's bring it all together in our final section, number 4, navigating your submission. We've gone through all the what and why. Now let's talk about the how. How do you actually get this thing through the review process smoothly and avoid all those traps we talked about at the beginning?
And here we are back where we started. These are the top reasons for delays, the greatest hits of submission mistakes. Missing reports is a classic. A messy, poorly organized file. Oh look, there's our old friend, inconsistent data across documents. Another huge one is just leaving a GSPR blank because you think it doesn't apply. You can't do that. You have to explain why it's not applicable. And for the love of all that is holy, do not send in summary reports. The reviewers want to see the full, unabridged, original data. Period.
Look, if there is only one thing you take away from our time together today, please let it be this. Your technical documentation is not, I repeat, not a one-time project.
What it is a living file. It's a dynamic, breathing document that has to be completely integrated into your quality management system. It needs to be updated constantly for the entire time your device exists, from launch day until the day it's retired.
So that really leaves us with just one last question for you to take back to your team. I want you to really think about this. Is your technical dossier just a static snapshot, a picture taken on the day of submission, frozen in time? Or is it what the IVDR demands it to be, a dynamic, living reflection of your device's entire journey? Because honestly, the answer to that question is going to determine whether you succeed or fail.